Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate all the amazing people who are making coastal Mississippi such an amazing place to live, work, and play. Hey, listen, we've had a string of really good shows. Looking back on the past week, might bring your attention to a few that you, if you missed them, you can go to your favorite podcast platform or YouTube or Facebook or wherever you get your news and information. You'll find SuperTalk Mississippi Media there. But I had a terrific conversation with the Speaker of the House from Mississippi, Jason White, and we talked about his life story, where he comes from, Kosciuszko, where he lives now in this small town of West Mississippi with 250 people there. I travel through West on a regular basis, headed up to our place up in the Mississippi Delta. But it was a great conversation to understand the essence of who our speaker is. And if you listen to that conversation, I think you'll have a much better understanding of who he is as a leader, his willingness to cross the aisle, his willingness to listen to others, to get to know people better. Really, really good stuff. I had Josh Morganman on, the top hurricane chaser in the world, who has built a house in Bay St. Louis. And we talked about the great housewarming party he had where storm chasers from all over the world came there. James Reynolds came from Japan. Jim Cantori came from the Weather Channel, and so on. It was an incredible housewarming party. But he'll be living there part-time, and then, of course, he's got a place up in L.A. where his marketing and branding business is located called Symblaze. But we talked about the busy hurricane season that's going to be, unfortunately. And if you missed that conversation, go back and take a look at it. And then there's more, but one other that I want to bring your attention to is when I was in Alabama, I led the oil recovery efforts for the state of Alabama for Governor Riley. And I got to know some amazing people. But one of the people I got to know was a guy by the name of Chris Nelson. He was a significant leader in the seafood industry, and his family owns Bon Secours Fisheries down in South Alabama. And I learned a lot about the industry from Chris, and he joined me to talk about challenges in the industry, the way that restaurants and others try to use domestic to meet the needs. But then since demand for seafood is so high, that's where the import part kind of kicks in. But we talked about the challenges that restaurants have as it relates to that. And it was a really, really good conversation. So just like when we talk about the energy policy, it's not necessarily just a domestic discussion. It is a worldwide discussion. It's a global discussion. The same thing is true with seafood for the most part. But one of the things we talked about is what we've done in Mississippi with farm-raised catfish in Mississippi. And we can take sort of a card from that playbook and maybe apply it to Gulf fresh seafood. And I think some opportunities are going to be there for that. So now let's shift gears. I have been really looking forward to meeting the mayor of Waveland. He's been in the position for over a year now. We should have been together already, but we haven't. But this is an opportunity to kind of cover some ground that we can make up some ground. But I've been looking forward to meeting and having a conversation with Jay Trapani, the mayor of Waveland. So without any further ado, let me welcome Jay into the conversation. Jay, how are you doing, my friend?
Thank you, Ricky. I'm doing great. Another beautiful day on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. So
It is. Listen, when I was preparing for our conversation today, I've often said that some of the best sunrises and sunsets in the world are right here in coastal Mississippi. And what I noticed when I was checking social media and did search around Waveland, the thing I saw the most of was people posting pictures of sunrises there. But it's a special place. It's a beautiful place, isn't it?
It is a beautiful place. And I fell in love with Waveland at a very, very young age. And my mother started coming to Waveland from New Orleans when she was 4 years old. And at 1 month old, my birthday is June 2nd, so I just had a birthday. At 1 month old on 4th of July, I was on Nicholson Avenue in Waveland, and I've enjoyed every trip over here since then.
Yeah, you said actually that you were a weekender for 46 years. That really kind of tells the story of Hancock County in a way, that especially Bay St. Louis and Waveland. As I learned big time when I was working over in New Orleans, the number of people who have second homes in Waveland and in Hancock County, some even in Pass Christian, is pretty significant. And that's kind of defined that community. I'll add too, by the way, if you go back and look at the history of Waveland, at one point, people in Louisiana just assumed Waveland was part of Louisiana. They didn't even see it as being part of Mississippi. But that's an interesting part of its history, isn't it?
It's just a suburb of New Orleans is what it is. Yeah. Now, I tell people when they look into open businesses here that the 2020 census said we had 7,200 people, residents of Waveland. But on the weekends, it grows to over 10,000. We have that many vacation homes over here. And we get not only get people from New Orleans, we get people from Baton Rouge. We also get people from in-state, from Hattiesburg, that'll come down for the weekends. So our population almost, we get about 50% growth on the weekends.
Hey, well, listen, Jay, one of the things I remember so well, after Hurricane Katrina, I worked with Chuck Bienvenu on some of the public meetings that were held there. And I remember we wrote about this. I think it was the Stennis Institute was doing sort of the study about potentially bringing Waveland and Bay St. Louis together. And it went on for a few months, and it just kind of collapsed because the notion that anyone in Waveland was going to give up its identity or anyone in Bay St. Louis was going to give up their, it was an important thing to talk about because we learned something in the process. And I say it on the show all the time. We learned that buildings don't make a community, the people make the community. And exactly. Once you kind of understood that as sort of an operating principle to the recovery effort, we could move forward. But Waveland and Bay St. Louis, especially Waveland, literally if there's an ultimate ground zero for Hurricane Katrina, it was Waveland. And the work that had to be done there has been very, very significant. But it's been led by a lot of people who love that city. Mm-hmm. And you're beginning to see that resurgence now, aren't you?
Yes, we are. 90% of Waveland was destroyed in Katrina. And there was a meeting that I attended years ago between the Bay St. Louis Council and the Waveland Aldermen that was moderated by Judge Chris Smith when he was the assistant DA. And discussions were had back then about combining, because even at the 2020 census, we only have 16,000 people combined. And we got a lot of duplication of services. At one time, each city had their own tax collector. Now we only have one, Jimmy Ladner, who's the tax collector for the whole county. So there was some talk about combining, but it just never came to fruition.
But it's true, though, that buildings don't make a community, do they?
No, not at all. Not at all.
You sort of already understood that because you're native Louisianian, and let's take a step back for just a second. Tell me about, where did you grow up? Let's go way back, and where did some of the early influences on your life come from?
Well, I grew up in the part of New Orleans they call Gentilly, out towards the lake by the University of New Orleans, and my parents grew up in the Irish Channel section of New Orleans. My grandfather had a corner grocery on 2nd and Annunciation in what they called the Channel. And my parents got married and moved out to Gentilly. So, a lot of my background is all based around athletics. I think that's where I developed the leadership skills that I have and the competitiveness and the drive to be successful, all from sports.
Yeah. Listen, I really loved my time in New Orleans. I as the former publisher of the Sun Herald, having been raised here, having been a lifelong Saints fan, having spent so much time in New Orleans, you don't get New Orleans till you live there. And I lived in the Warehouse District when I was publisher of the Times-Picayune and president of NOLA Media Group. And I had the pleasure, my number two, when I was at the company, his name was David Francis, and his father is Norman Francis from Xavier University. And man, Norman, you're talking about an icon in the U.S. for that matter. Mm-hmm. But getting, and then Terry Baquet, these guys from let's see, the Ninth Ward and the lower Ninth Ward and places like that, learning their history, learning the cultural dynamics and diversity of that place. Gosh, what a special place. And the other thing I learned is that you can have part of the town mad at you and the other part of the town loving you to death. So there's so much participation in that community, so much love for that community. And, the same scenario after Hurricane Katrina for New Orleans, people that could afford to stay there, they stayed through some tough situations, wouldn't you say?
Oh, definitely. I wish that I could visit New Orleans as a tourist. because you take so many things for granted when you're born and raised in a city. You know, New Orleans is just a unique city. And I used to raise money for the University of New Orleans after I got out of healthcare. And I used to tell people, donors, that when you wake up in Berlin or wherever, you don't know much about the United States, but you know New York, Chicago, you know New Orleans, so everybody knows about New Orleans, and it's you just got to visit it and live it, and it's a very unique place.
Well, listen, I had the opportunity to get to know Andreas Dwani, the famed architect and planner, who's the father of new urbanism. He worked with us here in coastal Mississippi on the charrettes and helping kind of visualize what could be possible in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. And he also did some work over in New Orleans. And he described New Orleans. He said when he went into New Orleans, because he's very global in his experiences, worked all around the world. And he said, I had a hard time sort of doing business in New Orleans until I came to a conclusion about New Orleans that it's more like a Caribbean state. And once I started to manage it like a Caribbean state, everything was kind of easy to understand. But it is different, isn't it? It's so you have to be there and experience it to really appreciate that.
Yes, you do. And like I said, if you live there, you take a lot of it for granted.
Yeah. So you spent a career in healthcare.
Yes, I got started in healthcare right after college. I had a desire to I thought I wanted to be a dentist, and
so hey, let's do this. We're at the end of this segment. We're meeting and having the opportunity to get to know better the mayor of the city of Waveland, Jay Trapani. When we come back on the other side, we'll talk about his career in healthcare. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. We're having the opportunity to get to know better today. Someone I should have had on the show some time ago, but look, we're making up some ground now. This is Jay Trapani. He's the mayor of the city of Waveland, and we're just kind of telling the story. We went to break. He had a career in healthcare, so I wanted to hear more about what he did and how long he did it and all of that.
Yeah, Ricky, I was a biology major first time around in college, and thought I wanted to be a dentist. And one day I decided I just didn't want to be in an office every day looking in somebody's mouth. So I wanted to stay in healthcare, went into sales, and got a job selling hospital equipment, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And I stayed in it for almost 30 years. I was in different hospitals in Louisiana and Mississippi, southern Arkansas on a daily basis. I used to go on open heart surgery, sold an instrument that measured the clotting time of blood. So I was right there with the surgeons and the perfusionists, and it was rewarding, very rewarding job. And what happened from the time I started, when I first started, I sold to the nurse who took care of the patient. And when I got out in 2010, and I was working for a major hospital bed company, and I was no longer calling on the doctor or the patient. I was calling on Blue Cross Blue Shield, and they were making the decision on the health and future of a patient. And I just got pretty frustrated with it. It had changed so much, and so I decided it was time to move on and look for something else.
So what did you do after that?
I actually went to work for St. Stanislaus over here in Bay St. Louis. I was educated by the same brothers, the Brothers of the Sacred Heart in New Orleans, and I went to work raising money for St. Stanislaus. And, raising money is just another sales job. You're selling the school to a potential donor. Stayed with St. Stanislaus for about 3 years, and then I was recruited by a Diamond Head resident, Dr. Pete Foss, who became the president of the University of New Orleans. So I started driving back and forth every day, working 8 to 5 in New Orleans, but enjoying my time back in Waveland in the evenings and on the weekends.
Yeah. That's very interesting. 2 points as it relates to Stanislaus and helping to raise money for Stanislaus. What a great way to get connected with people who have an interest in Hancock County in particular. But, Stanislaus, you got people coming from all over the United States there, don't you?
Definitely. The dorm was just busting at the seams until Katrina. I think after Katrina, census went down because I think parents were a little leery They saw all the video and films of what destruction a storm can cause on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and didn't want to send their child into that environment. But, the brothers and the monitors of the dorm took very good care of the dormitory residents during Katrina. And one funny story is all the paperwork was destroyed for a lot of these foreign students from Korea and China. So they had to put them on a bus and send them over to Houston to these different consulate offices so they could get the necessary paperwork to get them back home to their families.
This is so interesting. And UNO, it's interesting that did the president live in Diamond Head?
He did, and he still does. He's retired.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I watched him closely. I always wondered and thought about, because when I was there, I left in 2016, so they were very focused on their strategy and where they were going to go from where they were, and how they were going to grow and deal with the challenges that all universities have today. I haven't really caught up with him since, but it's interesting that someone from Diamond Head actually is the president of UNO. How's UNO doing these days?
I think UNO is doing very well, very well. I think enrollment is up. It's continuing to add some outstanding programs. I'm actually a graduate of the University of New Orleans, and so I continue to follow them as much as I can. Well,
that's cool. So anyway, you of course coming over here. You were a weekender for all those years, and of course working for St. Stanislaus gave you even a further connection. But at some point along the way, you ran once, you ran again along the way. You weren't going to run again. Then people convinced you to run again. And sometimes it's about being in the right place at the right time. It's about all the stars being in alignment. That's the way political offices are these days. But it's a good thing you hung in there, because people really were really encouraging you and supporting you in a big way come that third time, weren't they?
Yes, they were, Ricky. I had never had a thought about being in politics. And while I was working for the University of New Orleans, I came home one evening, hadn't taken my tie off yet, and two Waveland police officers walked up my front steps and asked me, would I consider running for mayor? And I was like, I never thought of it before. So I started attending the Waveland meetings on a regular basis, and I did that for about 16 months. And I thought I had the skills and abilities to help move Waveland forward. And that's what I tried to do in 2014. But I was working in the University of New Orleans, so I didn't have a lot of time to campaign. So I came back. I took a job as the executive director of Hope Haven Children's Advocacy Center on Highway 90. In 2018, I said, well, let's give it the good old college try, get out, knock on doors as much as I can, and campaign again. And, the first time I lost by 150 votes. The second time I campaigned and lost by 150 votes.
Oh, no.
So that's when I decided, well, maybe I'm not the people's choice. Let me move on. Got rid of all my campaign literature, my campaign signs, and was just sitting back enjoying myself, trying retirement. When people came up to me and asked me, I was actually at church, and people asked, would you run again? We didn't support you in the past, but we'll support you this time. And so I gave it much thought and decided to go ahead and give it another try.
Well, it's so interesting. You think about raising money for St. Stanislaus or being involved in University of New Orleans in the way that you were, or your years of experience in healthcare and sales. But, running a city is very similar to that. It's about developing relationships with people. It's about having vision. It's about raising the bar. It's about you can never be satisfied. You want to do better the next year and the next year. And you got a city like Waveland that is really beginning to. I said it was. I can't remember the exact conversation who I was talking to. We were talking about Bay St. Louis and how the price of land in Bay St. Louis and the price of homes in Bay St. Louis, and then as the less and less land became available in Bay St. Louis, then Waveland began to take off, and people loved that area. And even with some of the elevation challenges that Waveland had, the amount of consolidating of lots and the amount of building that's taking place, it was beginning to find its way, wasn't it?
It definitely was. And, as I talk to groups around the state of Mississippi, and sometimes I even go into Louisiana to talk to groups, I always make that point that between the state lines of Louisiana and Alabama, Waveland's probably the most economical place to buy a piece of land and build a house or buy an existing house. Bay St. Louis is pretty saturated right now. Prices are at New Orleans prices. And so Waveland is very appealing to a lot of people. We probably have 15 houses being built right now with about 5 or 6 house plans turned in each and every week. So we just hired a new building official, and the whole building department's staying very busy.
Well, what's interesting about the reality of Waveland is that insurance continues to be a bit of a challenge for all the coastal areas of the Gulf. Coastal Mississippi is no different than that. The requirement, ABFE requirements, how high you have to build a house, where the base flood elevation needs to be, and all these things. It took a while. I mean, you see it in Gulfport, you see it in Biloxi, you see it in Long Beach, Pass Christian. You even see it, obviously in Hancock County. But finally, people started to accept the reality of it, and they realized that the way to minimize risk, insurance risk, and the need to rebuild, to make us more resilient, we have to build higher and we have to build stronger. And that's happening now. And people have sort of accepted that reality, and they're investing accordingly, aren't they?
Yes, they are. My house before Katrina was 3 feet off the ground. Now I'm 14 feet off the ground. And so at my age, I even had a knee replacement done because I hit those steps each and every day going in and out of my home. So people have realized we have a beautiful place to live, and we have a lot of things to offer people, and it's a great weekend home for people that want to come over and relax, and you just have to deal with it and deal with the elevations. And the good thing is we're starting to see commercial development that the elevations could have been holding back over the past, since 2005.
Yeah, we had talked in previous mayors about elevated master plans for Nicholson and so on. When we get back on the other side, we just talk about what is going to happen. What is the future of commercial development, and what's the future of the opportunities that exist along the Beach Boulevard area? We'll continue our conversation with the mayor of the city of Waveland, Jay Trapani, right after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I have Mayor Jay Trapani from the city of Waveland with us today, and love checking in with the mayors because they're on the ground level. And as I was talking last week with the Speaker of the House, Jason White, politics is a local thing. Democracy plays out locally. And when you're the mayor of a city, man, you see all these voices. But we're going to talk about commercial development in Nicholson Avenue and what Beach Boulevard and all. We'll come to that here in just a second. But what I wanted to ask you about, third time was a charm for you in terms of getting elected. But you had a passion because you fell in love with Waveland and you wanted to make a contribution. You brought a lot of experience to the table. What did you see in terms of a vision for Waveland that excites you? Because I should point out to people, when I asked Jay before we started the conversation at the very beginning, before we went on the air, I said, "You having fun?" And he said, "I'm having a blast." I love, most mayors are going to answer it that way because it's a labor of love. They didn't look at being mayor as a promotion in life. They look at it as an opportunity to be able to give back. And that certainly describes Jay. What did you see in the city, and what contributions did you want to make when you were elected?
I just had visions of what Waveland was in the past before Katrina. I didn't have visions of where I wanted to take it. I just wanted to get it back to where it was. I didn't want to lose the small town charm. That's what brings people to Waveland. I just wanted to bring back the Coleman Avenue businesses to the best of my ability, bring back Highway 90, and just increase the services that the citizens pay taxes to receive. So it wasn't a great vision of some new city. It was just bringing back the old city that everybody loved.
Yeah. So how would you assess where you are today as it relates to that?
We're moving forward. We're definitely growing. Highway 90 is taking off. We have announced a $16 million dual brand Marriott hotel that's coming in. Harbor Freight recently came in and opened a new store. We are under construction on an express oil change out on Highway 90. Quiznos, a gentleman bought the old Rite Aid building, not Quiznos, I'm sorry, McAllister's Deli is coming in. So we got a lot of growth going on Highway 90. Nicholson Avenue, which is Highway 603, the intersection of 603 and Highway 90 is the most traveled intersection in Hancock County, the highest traffic counts. So this area is attractive to businesses. And I want to mention that the Port and Harbor Commission, Port and Harbor Authority with Blaine LaFontaine as the head, is the main economic development arm of Hancock County. And they're doing great things up there, working together with me, working together with all the cities to move Hancock County forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's really exciting. I tell you, one of the things I quote Jerry St. Pé, the former CEO of Ingalls, pretty regularly, because he said on my show, like it was the first week that we were doing this show, he said that his biggest fear was that we took some of the industries that are part of coastal Mississippi for granted. And the way he would paint the picture is very similar to the way that I paint the picture today, and that is that you've got Ingalls and Chevron on one side and Stennis Space Center and the blue chip industries that are part of that. I mean, you know, John Hairston and I talked about it, CEO of Hancock Whitney talked about it last week as well, that the vision that created Stennis Space Center, think about the vision to create that massive buffer zone that is now the testing place for both the government and private enterprise as it relates to commercial air flight, our space flight today. It's incredible what's happening there, but it's not just space flight. It's all massive computers and all the work of our government and all the amount of entrepreneurship that's happening there. It tends to be out of sight, out of mind. It's easy to take for granted because it's kind of over there. Mm-hmm. But boy, I bet it's something you think about, isn't it?
Oh, we think about it every day. Most of the people that live in this area are employed either by one or two industries. They're either employed by Stennis Space Center or the casino industry. And you know, in a way, it's sad because our children. You know, I have 6 kids. None of them live here. They finish school and they have to go other places to find jobs unless they're in that industry, the tourism industry or the space-related industry at Stennis. So I think a company or an organization like the Port and Harbor is trying to bring in other industries to Port Bienville, to the Stennis Airport, so we can keep our children here and keep our grandchildren close to us.
Yeah, well, you look at the Hancock County Port and Harbor responsibilities there. You've mentioned it, but people don't think of Hancock County having a port, but it does. You think about its responsibilities over Stennis Space Center, Stennis Airport, very important. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the economic development piece of that. Hancock County's got a lot going for it when you start thinking about the economic development opportunities, doesn't it?
We definitely do. And, I recently, back in 2017, took the Hancock County leadership class that's offered through the chamber. And, having spent basically my whole life here, I learned so much more about Hancock County that I didn't even know it existed. So it really does have a lot to offer.
Yeah, Tish Williams and her team. Tish is kind of an icon, really, when you think about her role after Katrina and then her role as the continuing leader of the Hancock County Chamber. The fact that she brought in really significant, foundation experience when she came here, and she's been able to do things that I think have been very important to Hancock County. But yeah, she sings the praises of all these different components. I mean, like they work for one of the efforts I think that we've talked about on the show. We've had leaders from this effort, but the relationship, again, coming back to Waveland being sort of a bedroom community for Louisianians, kind of like a New Orleans number 2. But you think about the relationship in Stennis and Michoud and how those two organizations work together. And there's, in fact, a Stennis and Michoud Partners organization because they're so tightly connected. But and she's kind of the leader to help kind of pull all that together. But we're lucky to have people like Tish. We're lucky to have a very active Hancock Chamber involved in leadership. You talked about going through leadership. It's just hugely important to have people going through that leadership program so they can see the dynamics of what it takes to make a county like Hancock County's tick. It's important, isn't it?
Very, very important. And one thing that you brought up that I want to go back and hit on when I mentioned the dual brand Marriott Hotel. Studies have shown, and I had this conversation with Tish, that when somebody visits Stennis, where they stay on that visit is usually, if they get transferred in, is usually where they build a home. And so we were losing a lot of people to St. Tammany Parish and to Harrison County, because we didn't have any hotels. And so this developer who's coming in, who actually lives in Picayune, Mississippi, he saw this. He did his pro forma. He's predicting high occupancies from the day they open the doors because of Stennis Airport, Stennis Space Center, and Port Bienville. And so we're hoping when he gets the doors open, those people come to visit those locations. They stay at the hotel on Highway 90 in Waveland in Hancock County. They get transferred in. They build a home here. And so we don't lose them to other places. That makes so much sense. It just seems like common sense. But it would be easy to miss something like that, a dynamic like that. You got to look at the data and see what the data tells you. So someone's really paying attention. But it's kind of the perfect way to address that possibility of attracting more people to live there. And gosh, that hotel is going to be important, isn't it? And this Marriott, like I said, is going to be dual brand. It's going to be short-term stay and long-term stay, about 55 rooms on each side. So the person who gets transferred into Stennis for 3 months, they can actually get a room at the Marriott and have their little kitchenette and everything. So it'd be like an apartment that they can stay in.
Yeah, that's really cool. Listen, when you think about how Waveland residents, the challenges they've had over so many years, you think about how they're involved in the community. Democracy in that city is still very much alive and well, isn't it?
It sure is, yeah. We got a lot of people that stay involved in the daily operations. I have to laugh because, I'll be dealing with somebody about almost $1 million project, and then the next call is about painting a free throw line on the basketball court at the playgrounds. So people are involved at all different levels.
They are. It's interesting. I made this point with the Speaker of the House last week, but I made the point that, because he had been a city attorney, he had been involved as a municipal judge and a youth court judge, and it's the same thing, the same point that I made to you, that local is where politics plays out. And he, where he lives is West Mississippi. There are only 250 people that live there. Mm-hmm. But we were talking, he said, when he was an alderman, somebody brought a cassette recorder and played the barking dog that they were complaining about. And I'll finish the rest of the story when we get on the other side. But we're having a conversation with the mayor of the city of Waveland, Jay Trapani, and we'll look forward to continuing that conversation in the final segment. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I have the mayor of the city of Waveland, the fine city of Waveland, the growing city of Waveland, Jay Trapani. And when we went to break, I was conveying this story that the Speaker of the House, Jason White, shared on my show last week about when he was an alderman in the city of West Mississippi, 250 people strong. We were talking about how it doesn't matter how large or small a city is, democracy is going to play out. And he talked about the guy who brought the cassette player in, and he literally played a recording of the dog that was barking that he was there to complain about. And we use that as kind of an image, Jay, as we continue to talk about his ascension in state politics and state leadership, that the dogs are still barking. They bark louder. They might bite a little harder. But at the end of the day, they can actually bite pretty good, still at the local level. But that is democracy, isn't it?
Definitely, definitely. But that's what you want. I mean, we're here to serve the people. You know, my predecessor, Mayor Mike Smith, had a saying that he had 7,000 bosses. And we really do. We work for the people. And, you know, what's important to me on one day is not as important to somebody else. And what's important to somebody else may not be as important to me until they bring it up to my attention. And then all of a sudden it moves to the top. Because
squeaky wheel, in fact, does often get the attention, doesn't it?
It definitely does. Yeah.
That's the way of the world. That's the way. I enjoyed my visits with Mike along the way. He was super passionate about that city, wasn't he?
He sure is. And I've run into him occasionally. He's always got a nice tidbit of experience to share with me.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm really sure he does. Hey, listen, one of the things I wanted to focus on for a second before we get too far away from it as we kind of end the show, one of the things I was impressed with, you know, sort of looking at your bio, is that you've always been engaged in some way, volunteering in the church, you know, coaching youth sports or whatever. But you've always, even during the biggest part of your career, you've always been giving back to the community. Where did that come from? Did your parents instill that in you, or where did that come from?
I think it did come from my parents. My parents were always involved in the community that we lived in the Catholic school that we all went to, and to the neighborhood playground where we all played sports. Like I said, we're just an athletic family. My dad worked 5.5 days a week, so we didn't have a lot of time for hunting and fishing and things like that. So I never did develop those interests. But yeah, they've definitely turned me into a person that likes to give back. My wife says I can't tell anybody no. If they ask me to join an organization, I'm usually right there. You know, I'm not one to volunteer, but I'm one to say yes if I'm asked. You know.
Yeah. Listen, you mentioned the casino industry, but you've got Silver Slipper there on the point. You have to drive through Waveland to get there. And John Ferrucci is typically heavily engaged in the community. But that we can't overstate how important Silver Slipper is to that area, can we?
Oh, no, not at all. Mr. Ferrucci is always lending a hand when we have events like we brought, under my administration, we brought Cruising the Coast back to Waveland after many years of not having an event associated with the cruising. He helps us out with that. He helps us out with just about everything that we need. He's been a great gift to Hancock County and Waveland.
Yeah, I've known John for a long time, before Katrina and then since Katrina, and I love visiting with him on the show. I consider him a friend. Mm-hmm. I mean, we only have known each other through our professional lives, but we share a passion for coastal Mississippi. He's a guy who rarely can say no to anyone. He's going to find a way to help. He does a lot for the community, in fact, that a lot of people don't even know about him. He does quietly, just does a lot of stuff for the community. But you know, if you're going to have a partner, and you know what's really remarkable is that he also has now, you know, corporate responsibilities for casinos all around the United States. But he maintains, when I gained corporate responsibilities when I was at the Sun Herald, I still wanted to be publisher of the Sun Herald. I wanted to have my legs on the ground here and involved in the local community, and that's the approach that he's taken. So, to a lot of extent, people who have engaged with John at the local level don't even know that he's got these other responsibilities that take him away from here. But it's great to have a partner like him.
I think one of the biggest tributes to John Ferrucci is the fact that none of his employees leave him. You know, especially on the executive level, administrative level, they hired by him and they stay until they retire, and that's a great tribute to a leader of any organization.
Yeah, you can, you know, again, and you can go back and listen to any of the conversations I've had, and he will always give the power back to his people. He always leans toward them, and you can tell how loyal he is to them and how loyal they are to him. He's nurtured so many relationships along the way. And you think about what they built there, you know, then the decisions they made to build there, and the decisions they've made to continue to invest in that casino. Again, just terrific opportunity for Mississippi and Hancock County specifically. Listen, Jay, it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you, my friend.
Oh, it's been, the time's gone way too fast. So much more we could cover.
Well, we'll cover the next visit. We'll get together regularly. This has been Mayor Jay Trapani from the city of Waveland. It's been a pleasure. Listen, have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Ricky. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.